One evening, as they sat together in the cafe after closing, Wei Lun handed Liang Chen a pastry he had created just for him, a delicate tart filled with oolong custard, topped with candied orange peel. "It's inspired by us," he said softly. "The tea is grounding, steady. The orange peel adds brightness, spark. Together, they balance." Liang Chen took a bite, overwhelmed by the gesture. "It's perfect," he said. "Just like us." Wei Lun smiled, his eyes shining. "Then let's keep building this. Let's make it last." The moment was quiet, but it carried the weight of promise. They both knew that marriage was no longer just a dream. It was a future they were moving toward, step by step, moment by moment. Life together had settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and alive. Liang Chen and Wei Lun had grown accustomed to each other's habits. The way Wei Lun hummed softly while baking, the way Liang Chen read late into the night, the way they both instinctively reached for each other's hands when walking through crowded streets. These small routines became the fabric of their intimacy, weaving their lives together in ways that felt permanent. Yet, with deeper intimacy came new challenges. The cafe, though slowly gaining recognition, remained financially fragile. Some weeks were encouraging, with customers lining up for Wei Lun's creations, but others were painfully quiet. Liang Chen often worried about the toll it took on him. "You're working yourself too hard," he said one evening, watching Wei Lun knead dough with weary hands. Wei Lun smiled faintly. "It's my dream. I can't give up on it." Liang Chen reached for his hand, stopping him gently. "Dreams are worth fighting for, but not at the cost of your health. Let me help more." Wei Lun looked at him, his eyes softening. "You already do. Just being here makes it easier." The words carried a weight that Liang Chen felt deeply. He realized that love wasn't about fixing everything. It was about presence, about standing beside someone even when the world felt heavy. Meanwhile, Liang Chen faced his own struggles. His career remained demanding, and though he had turned down the promotion, the workload was still relentless. There were nights when exhaustion left him barely able to speak, when he collapsed onto the couch and simply leaned against Wei Lun, finding solace in his quiet presence. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Liang Chen admitted, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to balance this, my career, your cafe, us." Wei Lun leaned against him, their shoulders touching. "You don't have to be strong alone. That's what we're here for, together." The reassurance eased Liang Chen's doubts. He realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience, about persistence, about choosing each other even when life was difficult. Their conversations began to turn more seriously toward marriage. The idea had lingered for months, but now it carried a new urgency. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, Wei Lun spoke softly. "Do you ever think about when we should do it? Not just if, but when." Liang Chen paused, then smiled. "I do. I think about it more than I admit. I want it to be right, not rushed, not forced. Just us at the right time." Wei Lun chuckled. "Timing again. It seems to be the theme of our lives." Liang Chen nodded. "Because timing matters. We met at the right time when we were ready. And when we marry, it should be the same." The conversation was brief, but it carried the weight of promise. They both knew that marriage was no longer just a dream. It was a future they were moving toward, step by step, moment by moment. Their love was expressed in small gestures that carried profound meaning. Liang Chen began leaving notes for Wei Lun, simple messages tucked into cookbooks or left on the counter. "Good luck today," one read. "I love you," another said. Wei Lun, in turn, created pastries inspired by their relationship, offering them with quiet smiles. Each gesture was a reminder that love was not about grand declarations. It was about presence, about care, about remembering. One evening, as they sat together in the cafe after closing, Wei Lun handed Liang Chen a pastry he had created just for him, a delicate millefeuille layered with custard and fresh strawberries. "It's inspired by us," he said softly. "Layers, like our lives. Complex but sweet." Liang Chen took a bite, overwhelmed by the gesture. It's perfect, he said. Just like us. Wei Lun smiled, his eyes shining. Then let's keep building this. Let's make it last. The moment was quiet, but it carried the weight of promise. They both knew that marriage was no longer just an idea. It was a future they were moving toward, step by step, moment by moment. As their love deepened, so too did the pressures from the outside world. Families, careers, and the fragile balance of dreams all seemed to converge, testing the resilience they had built together. Liang Chen's parents, though slowly softening, continued to struggle with his choices. During a family dinner, his mother asked carefully, "Are you sure this is what you want? A life that isn't traditional?" Liang Chen looked at her, his voice steady. "I'm sure. I've never been more certain of anything." His father frowned, but there was less resistance than before. "We just want you to be happy." "I am," Liang Chen replied firmly. Because of him. The conversation was difficult, but it marked progress. His parents were beginning to see that happiness mattered more than convention, that their son's love was not a phase but a commitment. Wei Lun's family, though supportive, worried about the cafe. His mother urged him to consider alternatives, to think about stability. "You've worked so hard," she said gently. "But if it's hurting you..." Wei Lun shook his head. "It's my dream, and I'm not giving up on it." The cafe itself reached a turning point. After months of struggle, a local food blogger discovered Wei Lun's creations and wrote a glowing review. Suddenly, customers began to line up, eager to try the pastries that had been described as art on a plate. Business improved, slowly but steadily, and for the first time, Wei Lun felt hope that his dream might survive. One evening, as they sat together in the cafe after closing, Wei Lun spoke softly. "I think we're going to make it. The cafe, us, everything." Liang Chen smiled, his eyes warm. "I never doubted it." The moment was quiet, but it carried the weight of resilience. They had faced doubts, pressures, and uncertainties, but they had endured. Meanwhile, Liang Chen began to think seriously about proposing. He didn't share his thoughts with Wei Lun yet, but the idea lingered in his mind, growing stronger with each passing day. He wanted it to be perfect, not grand or extravagant, but meaningful, a reflection of their love. He began to plan quietly, considering places that mattered to them: the cafe, the riverside, the night markets, even Jiufen. He thought about timing, about words, about gestures. He realized that the proposal wasn't about spectacle, it was about presence, about choosing each other openly, about saying forever in a way that felt true. One evening, as they walked along the Tamsui River, Liang Chen looked at Wei Lun, his chest tightening. He wanted to say it then, to ask, to promise. But he held back, waiting for the right moment. Timing mattered, and he wanted it to be perfect. Wei Lun, unaware of the secret planning, continued to dream aloud about their future. "One day," he said softly, "I want us to travel. Paris, Tokyo, New York. I want to see the world with you." Liang Chen smiled, his eyes warm. "We will. I promise." The words carried the weight of more than travel. They carried the weight of commitment, of love, of the quiet vow that Liang Chen was preparing to make. Their relationship, though tested, had grown stronger. Families were softening, the cafe was finding stability, and love was deepening. And though challenges remained, they knew one thing for certain: they were building a future together. Liang Chen had never been the kind of man to plan surprises. His life as a lawyer was built on predictability, on careful preparation, on anticipating every possible outcome. But when it came to Wei Lun, he found himself wanting to create something unexpected, something that would capture the essence of their love without grand spectacle, something intimate and true. He began to plan quietly, keeping his thoughts hidden even as they continued their daily routines. He thought about places that mattered to them: the cafe where they had first spoken, the riverside where they had shared countless walks, Jiufen where they had sipped tea overlooking the ocean. Each location carried memories, each one a possibility. At night, when Wei Lun had fallen asleep beside him, Liang Chen would lie awake, imagining the moment. He pictured himself holding Wei Lun's hand, speaking words that carried the weight of their journey, asking him to choose forever. He rehearsed sentences in his mind, discarding them, rewriting them, searching for simplicity. He realized that the proposal wasn't about eloquence, it was about honesty, about saying, "I love you, I choose you, I want forever with you." Meanwhile, Wei Lun had begun to think about proposing too. He didn't share his thoughts with Liang Chen, but the idea lingered in his mind, growing stronger with each passing day. He wanted it to be meaningful, a reflection of their journey, a gesture that said, "I see you, I choose you, I want forever with you." One evening, as they sat together in the cafe after closing, Wei Lun looked at Liang Chen, his chest tightening. He wanted to say it then, to ask, to promise. But he held back, waiting for the right moment. Timing mattered, and he wanted it to be perfect. Neither of them knew that the other was planning, that both hearts carried the same secret. Yet their actions began to reflect it, small gestures, tender moments, quiet promises. Liang Chen began leaving notes more often, each one carrying words of love. Wei Lun created pastries inspired by their relationship, offering them with quiet smiles. Each gesture was a rehearsal, a preparation, a step toward the moment when words would become vows. Their families, though still adjusting, had begun to soften further. Liang Chen's parents, once resistant, now saw the happiness in their son's eyes and began to accept Wei Lun more fully. Wei Lun's family, supportive from the start, welcomed Liang Chen as part of their world. The path was not without obstacles, but it was becoming clearer, steadier, more certain. One evening, as they walked along the Tamsui River, the city lights shimmering on the water, Liang Chen spoke softly. "Do you ever think about forever?" Wei Lun looked at him, his eyes warm. "All the time." The words carried the weight of promise, a quiet acknowledgement that both were thinking of the same future. As weeks passed, their secret plans grew more concrete. Liang Chen began to consider rings, discreetly browsing during lunch breaks, imagining the band that would symbolize their love. Wei Lun, meanwhile, began to think about words, rehearsing sentences in his mind, searching for simplicity. Neither knew that the other was preparing, but both felt the weight of anticipation, the quiet urgency of love moving toward forever. Their love, once tentative, had become undeniable. They had faced doubts, pressures, and uncertainties, but they had endured. They had built a life together, a rhythm of intimacy and resilience. And now they were ready to take the next step. The stage was set. The proposal was no longer just an idea. It was a future waiting to be spoken, a vow waiting to be made, a promise waiting to be sealed. And though neither of them knew exactly when or how, they both knew one thing for certain. The moment was coming. Soon, they would ask each other for forever. The quiet planning had gone on for weeks, each man carrying the same secret without realizing the other was doing the same. Liang Chen rehearsed words in his mind late at night, imagining how he would ask Wei Lun to choose forever. Wei Lun, meanwhile, experimented with pastries that carried symbolic meaning, envisioning how he might present one as part of his own proposal. Neither spoke of it aloud, but their gestures betrayed the anticipation. Liang Chen lingered longer in jewelry shops during lunch breaks, discreetly browsing rings. Wei Lun began sketching designs for a cake that would embody their journey, layers for resilience, flavors for joy, decorations for timing. One evening, as they sat together in the cafe after closing, the air heavy with unspoken anticipation, Liang Chen looked at Wei Lun, his chest tightening. He wanted to say it then, to ask, to promise. But he held back, waiting for the right moment. Timing mattered, and he wanted it to be perfect. Wei Lun, unaware of Liang Chen's secret, felt the same urgency. He wanted to ask, to promise, to vow. But he too held back, waiting for the right moment. Timing mattered, and he wanted it to be perfect. The irony was that both were waiting for the same thing, both carrying the same secret, both preparing for the same future. Their families, though still adjusting, had begun to soften further. Liang Chen's parents, once resistant, now saw the happiness in their son's eyes and began to accept Wei Lun more fully. Wei Lun's family, supportive from the start, welcomed Liang Chen as part of their world. The path was not without obstacles, but it was becoming clearer, steadier, more certain. One evening, as they walked along the Tamsui River, the city lights shimmering on the water, Liang Chen spoke softly. "Do you ever think about forever?" Wei Lun looked at him, his eyes warm. "All the time." The words carried the weight of promise, a quiet acknowledgement that both were thinking of the same future.